Welcome to my SAT video. This is for the writing section. Today we are looking at diction, right? So what is diction? It is how you use a word and using a word appropriately, right? And there are two ways essentially the SAT tests whether you understand what diction is. The first is whether you can place a word that makes sense, and by this I mean suitability in terms of definition. So whether the word you're using has a definition that fits the context and whether it makes sense grammatically. That the second bit is more of a good hint if a word does not have good diction. If a word does not fit in grammatically, it is not the correct word to use, even though you might think it makes sense to use that word. So in terms of knowing the definition, I think it's very important that you actually know the difference between the words that I have listed here. So accept is to receive something, it is to accept an award, to receive an award. Except though, the second word over here is everything but this. So I could say I drink everything except soda, let's say, right? And that would mean that I will drink anything but soda. Effect versus effect, right? Effect, the first one is a verb, right? So I would say a certain event affected me deeply. Effect though is the noun. So effect is this event had this effect on me. We know what the word means, but when we're using it as a verb, we use an A. When we're using it as a noun, we use an E. Illusion versus illusion. Illusion, or the one that begins with A, is when I'm referencing a certain piece. So if I say I have a dream, I'm alluding to Martin Luther King. Illusion is a mirage of sorts. Amount versus number. Number tends to be something that you can count. Amount is something that you do not count. Cash versus cash. The former is a hidden stash of something. So I could say cache of weapons. Cash is money. CASH is money. Complement versus complement. The one with an E means they perfectly go together, right? So if something complements if something complements something with COMPLEMENT, that means both of them are perfect together, right? And complement is praising someone. COMPLIMENT is praising someone. Illicit versus illicit. Now, elicit is to evoke something, right? So you could say, I tried to elicit information out of the firm. And illicit, with the one with an I, means something that is illegal. Have versus off. Have is a verb. I would have something. I would like to have this. Off is a preposition. It is a connecting word, right? I'm of the opinion. So it is a preposition, it's just a connecting word. Now we look at lose with one O versus lose with two O's. Now the one with LOSE is is the verb. So it is I lost my wallet or I lost my earphones. And lose, LOSE, is something that is not tight, right? So my jeans are loose. Principal versus principal. The one with an A is a high-ranking person. So you have a principal of a school. But the one that ends with PLE is a moral of sorts, right? Dan versus then. Dan is used for comparison. I am better than. You are better than. She is better than. Then is for time. Back then is how we'd use it. Now, two with a single O. This is 2 with a double O and TWO. TWO is a number. I have two sets of whatever. TOO is like, it's used for a comparison, right? I have the same pair of jeans too. So I have this too. It is, this is too much for me to understand. Whilst a single TO is a connecting preposition. We are going to go to the store. Whom versus who, right? Whom is generally the object of the sentence, right? So From whom did you borrow the pencil? Or, well, who is generally the subject. Who is this? Your versus your. So the one without the apostrophe is to indicate possession, right? This is your car. Your with the apostrophe means you are. So you're nice. You are nice. Less versus few. Less is usually not countable. Few is usually countable. I feel less angry now. I wouldn't say I feel few angry now. I have fewer cars than you. I would say that, but I would not say I have less cars than you, right? I have fewer cars than you makes more sense because cars are countable. There versus THEIR versus there with the apostrophe versus there as in THERE. So there shows, the first one shows possession, right? This is their car. The second one with the apostrophe is they are. They are pretty cool. They're pretty cool. And the last one, which is THERE, is when we're indicating a place. I've been there a couple of times where there could be any place really. It could be a cafe, it could be anything, but there indicates a place. It's important you know that you know the difference between these, and with that, let's go on to get examples, right? So there are two broad categories under which we classify physical quantities: vector and scalar. However, energy is scalar. Is a scalar quantity. There is a missing over there, and momentum is a vector quantity, right? Now, however is not the best word that fits over here, because there is no this has happened, but there is no reason to use something in the context of the word but or however within this sentence, right? So a better word, or a word that would better fit, is for example over here, right? Because eventually it would suggest that it is a part of a process, which it is not. Meanwhile, there is no event that is currently happening, and we're not saying that this was happening while in that event. We not use meanwhile in sentences like this. So for example over here is the best case, and this is kind of some of the questions they ask you about choosing appropriate words in the SAT. So for example over here is the best starter, because we're giving an example for scalar quantity and an example for vector quantity, right? So the answer is B. And over here, you're seeing that they're testing whether you know the difference between THAN and THEN. So Zara is one of the most successful business ventures in the fashion industry. Many owe its success to a business model that is arguably better than the business model of its competitors. Now this is a comparison. This means that the than that has to be here, the word that needs to be here is THAN, or it's better than. So obviously it is correct over here, yeah. But we also see there is an option. That has the word, but it has additional commas. Now if we go back to our comma rules yesterday, we noticed that this sentence is logically coherent by itself, so it does make sense. So we're not going to make it dense by adding commas, and therefore the sentence is correct as it is, and the answer is A, no change. Another question. Many industry leaders predict a 40% fewness in demand for automobiles as government expenditure on public transport increases. So ideally, fewness is not the correct word over here. We know that what the sentence is trying to convey is that there is a decrease in demand, but fewness, it's not grammatically correct to say fewness. And here we need something along the lines of the word reduction, right? So predict a 40% less in demand. We can't use less in this context, right? We need something along the lines of reduction. Or 40% few in demand does not really make sense. We see the decrease. A 40% decrease in demand does, however, make sense, and therefore we can say it's D. And something that's important to realize over here is that for these questions, generally the best idea is read it aloud slowly, and the one that sounds right is often the correct option, right? Because we are used to, none of us would likely say that, okay, there was a 40% few in demand, right? But sometimes we might not know that we are unconsciously always differentiating, that we are not choosing few, we are always using the word 40% decrease or 40% reduction, right? And when we read it aloud, we begin to understand, we can almost always automatically verify whether something is right or not, and reading it loud, not very loudly because you'll be in an exam hall, is an excellent tool for questions with where we're trying to identify a correct word that would go in there. But sometimes diction questions tend to be a bit harder. Here the word matches the tone. Here we are trying to choose a word that matches the tone established. So sometimes both words do make sense. So reading them aloud, you'd be like, okay, A does make sense, but B also does make sense, right? But at this point, it is up to choosing what the passage tone is, and you will always still see that one word may be slightly more appropriate than the next. To give an example, with decreased again, I could say the top tax bar was reduced, right? I could not say it was plummeted. Yes, plummeted is the same as decreased and reduced, but plummeted has a tone that would suggest that this change is very drastic, right? So it is something I would not use unless, let's say, the tax rate plummeted from 50% to 10%. So unless I could show that this is drastic, I would not use it. And the tax waned, right? Waned once again, although one could argue that it's possible, it is not the best option over here, even though it does mean decrease. Wane is more like reduce in intensity, and reduce is the objectively better word for this example, and therefore you can see that using the word reduced rather than the other three options would suggest diction, that you know which word is appropriate. I could say housing prices plummeted by £2,000 per square feet, right? I could also say reduced, right? But if it's falling by £2,000 per square feet, that change is drastic, right? And plummeted shows that I have diction. I know what diction is, that I am choosing a word with the appropriate tone, and a word that would be most appropriate for this particular example. The moon waned, right? I could say here this is an example of where the first two are definitely wrong, right? The moon reduced is very ambiguous. Is it reducing in size? And it's not real. When we say the moon waned, we're saying it's going to the cycle of the moon, where we're seeing fewer and fewer parts of it progressively. But reduced is not something we would use really. It does not provide the same effect, or it is not as appropriate of a choice as waned. And the moon plummeted is objectively wrong. That would suggest the moon is falling towards the center of the earth or something, which is definitely not the case. So the moon waned is objectively the better answer over here. And we can see that all of them roughly do mean decrease, but in certain examples one word is more appropriate than the next, and in essence being able to identify this shows that you have an understanding of diction. And let's do two more examples before I end this video. Now some of the things Thomas Edison discovered include the incandescent light bulb, the phonograph, and the vacuum diode, right? Some of the things that Thomas Edison discovered include the incandescent light bulb, the phonograph, and the vacuum diode, right? And so discovered suggests you found something that was already naturally existing. So we could ideally say that discovered is not the right word, although it is in fact actually rather objectively wrong, I'd say, because discovered suggests you're finding a phenomenon that is already naturally occurring. So I can discover the pattern of tides, but I can't discover an incandescent light bulb. I can engineer it, I can invent it, I can make it, but I can't discover it, right? I can discover the principles as to why the incandescent light bulb works, but I can't discover the light bulb itself, because it is more of an invention, right? And that is the difference between invention and discovery. Discovery is finding out about something that naturally occurs, realizing that this phenomenon exists, while inventing is engineering something altogether. So we're already seeing that invented is perhaps a better option. Some of the things that Thomas Edison made included the incandescent light bulb. When we're talking in terms of Thomas Edison being a great innovator, of course, inventing is a word that is more appropriate in context. And some of the things Thomas Edison worked include, that does not make grammatical sense. We can just get rid of it straight away, and therefore we can easily understand that invented is a better choice than made or discovered, and therefore say the answer is B. 5. Dodos were overhunted. This eventually led to a decrease in number followed by disappearance, right? Now, this often one thing you'll see is that the SAT prefers, one of the things that the SAT wants you to understand is that that being concise or brevity is key, and therefore if something very long can be explained, can be rewritten in a shorter manner, that option is always the better option to choose. So this eventually led to a decrease in number followed by disappearance. This is a very long phrase that needs to be replaced. So if it's something that long, it is likely it needs to be replaced. So this eventually led to the demise of the dodos. It is definitely better than having something that long, so we're not going to rule out B. This led to dodos going extinct, which is basically a decrease in number followed by disappearance. So we began to see that, okay, C can work too. And D, a drastic fall in numbers, also works, but it misses out the fact that the number fell to 0 at one point, or they disappeared. So it's not D. D does not effectively replace this as well as B and C. Now C is more concise and gives a better term. It says they have gone extinct. It more effectively summarizes what demise of dodos is sort of rather vague. Extinct is a better way. It shows that you have choosing options, shows that you understand what diction is, you understand what brevity or concise or being concise is, and therefore C over here is the better option, because what do we mean by going extinct? We mean that their numbers fell and eventually to a point where there were none and they just disappeared off the face of the planet, and that is what we mean. And therefore C appears to definitely be a better option. This eventually led to dodos going extinct, concise, and a better way to say it. In the next video, we're going to look at grammatical conventions, a few more that we need to know, including singular, plural agreement, amongst a few other things. And with that, I hope you have a great day. See you next week with the next video.